Do you have a reading list for someone seeking the call? And maybe you could flesh out what you think first seeking the call means.
What I think they mean?
Yeah.
So the way I read that question was someone was talking about a call to the ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone's seeking a call to the ministry, what should they do? The call, I think every biblical call to the ministry is a person's not called unless they're called by God themselves in a way that they feel and palpably understand. And I think it was Martin Lloyd-Jones who said you should not go into the ministry if you can do anything else.
Okay.
In other words, it is this, like Jeremiah says, when I shut up, there's fire in my bones. I can't,
Okay.
I just have to, I have to preach or I'll pop or,
So when you say you can't do anything else, you don't mean you're not competent to do anything else?
I don't mean you're not employable.
Okay.
Where the call rests heavily upon you. At the same time, the historic understanding of the call is that the individual who's called is not the only one who feels it.
Okay.
So the call should be recognized by the church. So if someone says, I feel called to the ministry, if everybody in his home church stares at him baffled,
Right.
like, what are you talking about? He's probably not called. If everybody in the church, if all the old ladies in the church are squeezing his cheeks from the time he's 5, saying he's the sweetest young boy in the church and he should consider the ministry or consider seminary, that's not the call either.
Right.
So what you want is a twin pincher movement from the individual feeling, maybe I'm called to this, I feel a real desire to go in this direction, and the wiser heads, the gray heads, the people in the church who are going to have to replace themselves with, they're going to have to train and replace themselves with up-and-comers, are of a similar mind.
How do you, just going back on that, how do you distinguish between, on that external side, when people are telling you you really should be in the ministry, how do you determine whether you're getting that, a bunch of people who don't really know what a pastor is, who think you're sweet and ought to go in that direction, versus people who say, no, you're a leader of a congregation, you have this,
Right.
and you should be going this direction.
So everything boils down to what standard are you using, and what I look for is I believe that a minister of the gospel has to have an eye for the text and has to have an eye for the culture, the people, the world.
Okay.
He has to be able to read the text and he has to be able to read the world.
Okay.
And if he can read the text, and one of the ways I can tell if he's reading the text is if he's leading a Bible study or he makes a stray comment and he says something about a text that I've read 100 times and he points something out in there that I've never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
I think, he might have something here. And then if he's looking at the world and he knows what's going on in the youth group,
Right.
right? He doesn't take statements at face value. He knows all the dynamics. He knows the drama that's happening. Mm-hmm. He knows, not because he's a gossip, but he knows who's flirting with whom. He knows who's positioning for ego reasons. That person is reading the world rightly. They're reading personalities. They're like a quarterback who gets up to the line of scrimmage and they can read the defense. Mm-hmm. And there are many people in ministry who can't read the defense. Mm-hmm. All they're doing is they're remembering the notebook. Right. They might be a very good student and they memorized all the possible defenses in the notebook, but when they look at the field, they just don't see it.
Mm. And then, okay, so back to what reading list would you give this man?
I would give a person who is in that position or likely in that position a reading list of books that would help him confirm or deny that this is in fact the case. I would recommend Spurgeon's lectures to my students. is a great book on life in the ministry and what it takes to be a preacher. And I think if he reads that and he finds himself lifted and elevated and encouraged and inspired, that's telling you something. If you're saying, oh man, I could see myself doing that. So lectures to my students would be one of them. Preachers and Preaching, I think, is the title of Lloyd Jones' book. And I would say Biblical Eldership by Alexander Strauch.
Are there any biographies of missionaries or preachers that you would say that this is a good example of what a man aspiring to the ministry should aspire to?
Yeah. I don't think you ought to read these biographies. I don't think you ought to read biographies in the hope that you will duplicate everything that was done, because you ought to read biographies of people who are so far beyond imitation that but there's a way of being beyond imitation that just crushes you, and there's a way that inspires you. Jonathan Edwards would be this is bad. Ian Murray has got a good biography of Edwards, but there's another one, I want to say Mark Knoll, but a biography of Edwards is a good one. Arnold Dallamore's biography of George Whitefield is good, but don't expect that to be a description of your ministry.